Welcome to the October 24th Heartwork and Philosophy Guild meeting. And our first point of agenda is, how do we want to start? The circle is April, Ben, then me.
So taking my circle position seriously, I'm going to say I think we should start the meeting by doing our usual land acknowledgement, check-in and grounding, and then take one of the agreements and speak to that. And each time that we have a meeting, go on to a successive agreement, but only do one at a time or a couple at a time, just to save time. That's my suggestion. On to Ben.
Yeah, I like it, and I think I would generalize it a little bit, that we always start with a land acknowledgement, that it can be abbreviated a bit. And actually, I think we can combine, like, for example, as a grounding question, talk about your favorite agreement or what agreement speaks to you, or we could pick an agreement. I think what I'm saying is sort of two activities, a sort of an opening ground land acknowledgement, and then a period where we are checking in and looking at the big picture, looking at an agreement, but one of those aspects, and then we move into the agenda. So, and then we can rotate what that one item is. Over to you, Roland.
Yep. Let's give it a go. So we've gotten, that is the land acknowledgement in the agreement. Let's just start.
I will dive into doing a land acknowledgement, and I will cover the essentials. And the essentials are, we start with a land acknowledgement to ground ourselves and give ourselves some context for why we're meeting, as a reminder that the land is what unites us all, and the land is what we depend upon, the land and all of our relations and those interconnections. So in acknowledging the land, we are acknowledging our connection to all our relations, and let that be an inspiration for us to live in right relations to the extent we can, to do as good as we can until we know better and then do better, and to heal harms when possible, and at the very least to resist causing any further harm. And in doing that, we are hopefully modeling the wisdom that comes from indigenous cultures. And so in modeling that, we are showing our respect by enacting it, by trying to live by those values. And as a reminder that we have a debt of gratitude to all of the caretakers and stewards who have come before us, who have kept both the land and the knowledge alive. So that is my land acknowledgement. I pass back to you, Roland.
Awesome. So check-in. Check-in and grounding. Check-in.
What's one agreement that speaks to you? I was posing that as the check-in question.
I see. Okay. So the check-in question is, what is your favorite color? No. What agreement or function, or just agreement?
Let's just pick agreement today, and then some other day we could do function, for example.
Okay. What agreement speaks to you? April.
Today, what is really clearly and strongly speaking to me is speak from the heart, what's true for you. And I'm reflecting on that because sometimes I know I speak from an agenda. And I think if I keep repeating my agenda, it'll persuade other people.
Oh.
And really, I'm more helpful to myself and others by speaking from what I know is on my heart.
Hmm.
And over to Ben.
Hmm. Yeah, actually, I think I'm gonna just build on that because one of the things I also notice in myself is when I think I'm not allowed to say something or I shouldn't say something, that's when I start to get my back up, you know. And I feel this sort of, and I kind of shut down. I can't be present when I'm afraid there's something that I can't say. I start to check out. So yeah, being able to, whatever is true for me, I am allowed to say that, no matter what. And remembering it's just what's true for me for now. So it doesn't have to be a big deal. Over to you, Roland.
Well, thank you, April, for dropping that let's be real bomb. I feel like it is resetting the tone for me. And it is reminding me, well, I'm going to say the also and as a way of being able to talk about curiosity, because we had a meeting this morning and it has ruined me for the rest of the day. I'm exhausted. My brain isn't working. I can just go back to bed. And isn't that interesting? And it wasn't such a big deal. So I'm curious about why it has drained me so much. So and yeah, thanks for resetting the tone for the meeting. Um, so if we are going beyond going through the agreements um, and the functions, do we just jump into action items now? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, that works for me at least. Okay, with April's nodding, so
Yes.
And are these action items from?
the notes haven't been cleaned up since last time, so I'm just going to
Okay.
do that now.
Okay.
So actually, oh, actually, did we change? Aha, there we go. So talk amongst yourselves while I do a little editing, but you can talk through the things that you want on the agenda while I'm fixing this.
Okay. What do we have on the?
We do not have an agenda at this point. That's what I'm saying. So we have to create the agenda on the fly. So what are the things that each of us would like on the agenda?
How do we want to? What's the best? Um, I don't think I can do this. Can somebody please take over? I can't. I can't formulate things right now. I feel like I'm all bamboozled. If, with respect, may I ask somebody else to take over, please?
That would probably be me, since I'm the co-caretaker of, and I'm happy to co-caretake partly on your behalf. Action items. Okay, there was a number of things that came out in an email that Ben sent us earlier in the week. And I think there's something still about well, there's the perennial badge question. But I would also suggest that's not the first thing we might want to look at. There's the questions of how we pass on our learnings to other parts of the academy and other guilds. There's the question of seasonal thinking and seasonal learning. What's different about that? And when I read that, I really realized I wanted to talk about it. So that's my agenda for today. What else for agenda items. I don't know if there's anything that we want to report on, reflect on from the coordination meeting earlier this week. Or if we want to say anything about our relationship with other guilds. It seems to me that's an ongoing thing, but probably pretty important. And for some tasks that we take on, the relationship with other guilds is more important than for other tasks. So if we can somehow tease that out, I believe. Is any of this ringing bells with the group?
I just checked the reminder email that I sent out that has the action items from the last one, and I think you've covered them, and I think that Ben found the same thing because I'm seeing it in the agenda. So I guess it's establishing in which order do we want to talk about things, and do these things still ring true?
Are we in the circle?
Yeah, let's do that.
Good, because I think this is a good laundry list, and I feel like we started with how do we want to balance around opening material. I was just jotting down what we've agreed to as a sort of short-term experiment. I think a report from the coordination circle is good form and a good place to start, because it also, I think, might give us a little bit more focus on some of these other points. I also think then the next up is the seasonal thinking, in part because I generally remember that there was a direction from the coordination circle around next steps. So I think we have homework actually around the sort of seasonal. Actually, now that I think about it, it actually covers, because the charge is for us to write our annual report to the coordination circle. So in a way, I guess what we could use this time to sort of outline what we think goes in our annual report, and that covers sort of seasonal thinking and knowledge transfer. So back to you, Lalon. Those are my thoughts.
I'm going to pass.
In that case, I'm going to say I think this is the order that things should be in. I'm partly saying that because it satisfied my needs. They're all taken care of in that order, but I also think organically that this makes some sense. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense now that I'm looking, because I think we and that's, it's interesting because I think that well, I'm going to propose that we actually kind of get back into circle in talking about these items, but I am noting for myself that there is an organic nature to this, where there is a kind of, even though we didn't have this all sort of worked out when we got here, just piecing together, it's interesting to note that our last meeting, which we didn't quite remember, got translated into a message to the coordination circle, which turned into a homework assignment, which we didn't quite remember, which actually closed the circle and is exactly what we should be doing. So we're kind of leaving ourselves little reminders from the past to the future. So I think that's cool. Back to you, Juan.
That sounds good. I'm good with the order, so I'm ready to crack on. Over to you, April.
Okay, and I just want to say that I find it really useful to have reminders and to have those crumbs to follow on. It's almost like that too much gets in my head, some spills out my ears, and then if somebody picks up some of the stuff that spills out of my ears and say, oh, look at this, it's helpful to put my head back together, I guess. Okay, are we now going to start discussion of the issues in the orders that we have them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Does that take us to report from the coordination circle and what our homework is?
Yeah. Yep. That's how I would see it.
Okay. Um, and I'm wondering if part of what should be in that report is you know, a quick bullet point summary of what we identified last time as some of our learnings, because that's a way to show that there is some shift over time, and that we are considering things in a slightly different framework than we might have this time last year or even last season. I also think in that annual report that having something that defines seasonal thinking from the lens of this guild is a good idea. We may have a overarching kind of way of referring to seasonal thinking for every circle that gets coordinated in the coordination circle, but there's probably, by the nature and the functions of this guild, there's probably something that's a little bit different about that as compared to other guilds. So being able to put that in our annual or in the part of the report, I think would be useful. Over to whoever's next. Ben.
Mhm. And I feel like I just am mentioning because I think it's useful to call it out. We're kind of going back and forth between reporting on the coordination circle and what's coming out that we want to report back to the coordination circle, and I'm just capturing it in those different places. I'm going to try to remember what I think is useful from the coordination circle conversation as a framing for this. And I think the process that we have been formalizing, which is written into the bylaws now, is an annual aim, act, reflect loop. And
Right.
so we are structured to have an annual reflection period that starts officially October 31st is our end of year. And so the guild and it's sociocratic. So it bubbles up from the guilds to the coordination circle and then back down to the guilds. And so the process as outlined is actually what April was just saying, that those could have been prompt questions from the coordination circle. What have you learned this year? How are your responsibilities shifting? What seasonal kinds of reviews are what does that mean for your guild? How is that useful? And then I think the other thing too is lessons learned. I would throw onto that list of, well, actually, I think again, April got us started on that. Reminders are a very good thing. I think that's one of those little nuggets that probably works for everyone. Figuring out how to structure reminders is and it's our way woo way. It's one of those, a little bit of discipline around the reminders makes it a lot easier for other things to flow through it. So, and I think that's what I would report from. That would be my memory of what was important from the coordination circle, though I might be missing something. So over to you, Roland.
Was there something in there also about with given all of that, what does that tell you in terms of next steps?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And what are we talking about when we're talking about reminders? What can you name me the reminders that we have in place? that are useful over to April, I suppose.
A part of it is just picking up on cues when it's obvious that somebody needs to be reminded of something. And I have to say, the fact that, Roland, that you said that your brain wasn't working and that you couldn't proceed because you couldn't know how or what, was very helpful to me, because I have those moments too. And then I start to feel panicked, a little bit panicked, like, wait, I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing my responsibility. Did I miss something? I'm always convinced that, I shut my eyes or turned away or left the room and missed something. And so you giving the cue that there was a need for a reminder was really helpful. That then the rest of us could uh, throw a few things into the hat. And we didn't all of us have to know everything, but collectively then remembering. So it's need for reminder and what the indicator is, then the actual remembering from other folks, and then the feeding back in a way that can be heard by the person asking for the reminder, and then the response of the person asking for the reminder. And usually, if you've gone through that and just let it happen, it's a kind of a flow, and it releases other stuff. And then you find yourself being able to be back in the moment, I guess. For me, that is speaking my truth. Is that useful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would build on that. I think that and again, I think we're kind of just calling out how it works, and you can be, because you call it out, you can be handier with it, you can be, and it's so I think it's that double reminder. It's what I was saying too about, like, when you feel like you can't say something, like, I shouldn't admit that I'm lost right now, because that'll look bad. But actually, the reality is, if you're lost, it's really useful to say, I'm lost right now. And sometimes we're all lost at the same time. So that can be a useful opportunity for us all to say, okay, hang on, where are we now? Who remembers where we are? So I think, and this actually feels like essential heart work
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
right? This is actually, what is heart work around? In some sense, it's about um, let the problem be the solution, right? Or the obstacle is the path, or you can't have trust without transparency. Um,
Can
so
can
yeah.
you write all those down?
Mm. Yeah.
We've recorded it.
Oh yeah, of course. I just don't want to lose it. Again, bumper stickers come to mind. Bumper stickers for the heart.
Well, and I think those are forms of reminders. I think that's actually so Roland was talking about the different forms that the reminders can take. One is the check-in. Somebody needs a prompt and we do a quick reminder. The other is bumper stickers, which is also how we think of agreements, right? Little slogans that are mnemonic devices for ways of being that are more effective than ways, even the, like, joking about that took longer than I thought it would is a way of saying, yeah, there's nothing wrong here. Things take longer than you think they're going to, so relax, it's okay. So that's another form of reminder. And then the third form of reminder is the formal stuff, like writing down our meeting notes. And actually, we were prompted, the meeting notes weren't cleaned up from the last meeting. Usually they are. And I think that's a failure to practice as a form of practice. And isn't it useful to, actually have our agenda sort of linked from the last one to the next one? So I'm passing over to Roland so I can catch up on my note taking.
Well, yeah. I was just thinking about personal responsibility. And as you know, I am not a fan of uh, facilitating. And I've taken on the co-coordinating of artwork because trying to distribute, and I think that I have not been honest in having accepted that role and haven't been stepping up. So it's a bit of a reminder for me that I chose to accept it. And so if I chose to do it, then I need to do it. So there's a number of different things that are coordinator tasks that I've managed to slough off that I think I need to figure out how to reclaim. Like I thank you for taking the notes, Ben, and but things like updating Asana before the meeting, and um, I mean, I'm sending out the reminder, and I'm trying to remember that the coordinator is not the doer. The coordinator is kind of like the secretary. Um, so what can I do to to take back my responsibility, the responsibility that I accepted in being the coordinator for the guild, co-coordinator. Uh, so over to April.
Well, thank you for exploring that, Roland. I just also am compelled to say that I have noticed a number of occasions where you have stepped up, particularly in facilitation, and it's obviously not easy uh, for you to take on that role sometimes. And I've just been noticing that there's both a taking on of responsibility there and a growth in your skills over at least this season, and actually probably the season before as well. And I haven't articulated that, but I have noticed that. And so I just want to say keep on keeping on. Um, and that I really value you as a whatever it is we are, caretaker, and that I wish I could sit in the kitchen with you and smell what you're baking or cooking or working on, and just be by your side instead of looking at you on a screen where you're a little bit dim, not personally dim. I mean, I can't see you with the light source. um, so whatever you might feel about your role, let me just say I appreciate the fellowship and the support that you are there. I think I got off track, but that's a bit of remembering and remindering too on to bed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's actually part of this. What does seasonal work look like? In part, it is an opportunity because we already talked about how has our thinking shifted, and it's also, I think, what are we noticing shifts in each other? Where are people growing? Where are people taking things on? And Roland, I want to um be explicit about, we're all in this together. And so it's one thing to take on responsibilities, and there's reciprocity in all of this, right? How are you getting you deserve support for taking on the responsibilities that you take on, and how do we weave together our strengths in such a way that our weaknesses become irrelevant? And like some of this is there are functions here that I don't mind doing in I feel like I'm strong at them and they don't cost me much.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind doing them, and I don't want to overstep. And I also have complete faith in your ability to take them on and do them. So it's just communication, and this is where I think the badges um the badges can come in really handy. I think we're actually talking about badging
I think we are.
because if we can say, you know, here are the five. I think that facilitation can often feel daunting because it's such a big amorphous thing. But if it's really like your jobs are before the meeting, set up the Asana task, send an email, at the meeting, ask if anyone has anything to put on the agenda. You know what I mean? It's like the actual tasks are pretty discrete and accomplishable. And if you just had that list, you'd be like, oh, this is nothing. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. I don't like this one, you know? And I think that becomes, it's almost, I'm thinking the badge is more now as like, who is the keeper this week of the note taker badge? And it's like, I'm going to hand this one off. I've got too many badges on my table right now. Can you take this badge this week? So anyhow, I think that's all. I think the point I wanted to make is that as we're thinking about working seasonally, how do we also weave in the peer-to-peer support?
Yeah.
Not just as a guild, we've learned this, but individuals in the guild, here's where we need more help. Here's where we've accomplished something. So back over to April.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think particularly in this guild, seeking out times when we can talk about self-awareness and what that means now. And it shifts all the time. In essence, it builds all the time, but it might not build in positive ways. So having feedback from folks about that is helpful too. And that keeps us fluid, I believe, and keeps us from focusing on what feels like what didn't work. I mean, it's really useful to identify what didn't work, but what didn't work, period, full stop. And that then takes it away from ruminating or overthinking, which happens to me quite a lot. And if I'm overthinking, then I'm not present at all. So I'm not paying attention to what is on the agenda or where it is that we are in a discussion. So self-awareness, full stop. Over to Ben.
I'm interested in moving on. I guess we're kind of doing gathering consideration style of any of these questions. So I am now my curiosity has moved on to documenting how our thinking has shifted about responsibilities or relationships to other guilds.
Do
In
I
part
get
because I'm trying to remember that.
do I get it? Do I get a turn?
You're after me.
I know, but it went April to you and then back to April and now back to you. So I'm a bit
Oh, oh, do I pass to you? I
yeah.
thought I passed to you.
No, you passed to April. Anyway,
Okay.
Maybe I just jumped in.
I'll give you a turn. Your turn.
okay.
And who do you pass to? You're going to pass that back to April?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the circle. Okay. So I think that is reminding me, I think where I've gone wrong is that I was originally trying to circle instead of trying to run the meeting, if you see what I mean. And so I was trying to figure out how to, when we're in, sort of like, we talk in a circle, but in being in a circle, we are circle keepers. And that the role of the coordinator in the circle is the caretaker, not coordinate, is caretaker, right?
Yep.
Getting all confused in my terms. It's the role of the caretaker in the circle is to set things up and to be the support for the circle, not to run the circle. So I think that's maybe where I lost the track of things, because it's a kind of a subtle difference between, being in front of the class, directing things, and being in the group, and having the group is running things, and that what as the cord uh, as the caretaker, what is it that I do in the circle? And I think that this is actually a really apt topic for the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild. Getting into these subtleties about what does it mean that we do things in circles, and how does that reflect in the way that we use sociocracy, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is the comment that I wanted to add. And um, to continue with the circle, the next person is April. So I passed to April.
Are we still talking now about how our thinking has shifted over the year?
Roland, you want to handle that one?
I'm not in the circle, so whatever. Well, I think I was reflecting on where I think we started. Sure, yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. I just got a little bit lost about what the topic was, rather than the process, I guess. How is our thinking shifted? Yeah, I think it's partly, I mean, we've been experimenting with what is a caretaker role. And it's starting to get more solid in my head now. What else? I think we've also examined, our thinking shifted about what the guild is, and we did reviews of the functions and the main responsibilities and the main differences from other guilds, I believe. And I just think that we're getting more finessed at what we do, refined and finessed, I guess. And that we are more and more reminding ourselves that thinking about our thinking is not a bad thing. Because that leads us into probably some, exploration of things where we need to go in order to move on. I also think my thinking continues to shift in terms of this guild in knowing how to take on the responsibilities, not only just what the responsibilities are, but how do you take them on? How do you discharge them? And to some extent, I've been a bad kid in the background sometimes, thinking, what can I get away with? What can I get away with in trying to, get my own agenda out there somehow? Like, which part of this agenda do I put my agenda into? And also, how am I going to be held to accountability? When's that going to happen? Who's going to do it? And all of that, all of those questions, which of course come out of my former life. But that's what, I've been thinking through that. And so there's been shifts in that over time. And on to Ben.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking the overall question is right now is we are gathering what are the elements that we want to include in our annual report to the coordination circle. And so there's a number of things we've identified as kind of territory to cover. General lessons learned, specifically, what do we know? What have we learned about seasonal thinking?
Yeah.
And how is our shifting thinking over responsibilities and next steps? And yeah, I've got two thoughts that are sort of trying to get through the door at the same time. One is that we've had this question about where the boundaries are between different guilds, the boundaries in the Venn diagram overlapping areas. And it keeps shifting in my mind where those boundaries are. So we've had that conversation, but I don't know that I have like a landing place about it. And there's a part of me that thinks that's actually what happens at the AGM. Like that's what happens at the annual design charrette when we're all in the room and we're thinking big picture all together, which is the other thought, which I think we've talked about. April, you're talking about the thinking about our thinking. There is this kind of sloshing that happens that is hard to put your finger on. Sometimes feels like it veers towards getting lost, getting distracted, getting following red herrings, but it seems to kind of just keep coming back to something. So there's something about, and I'm actually thinking now about like a scatter plot of
Yeah.
any one datum doesn't help. But if you and actually when you see the first couple, it can seem like there's just chaos. Everything is just sort of equally scattered all around. But over time, as you start to get more, there's a cluster in the middle where it's like, oh, right. Okay, that part is clear. This is the center and this is the fuzzy edge. And I think there's something to that about like as we're thinking through the guilds, there's always going to be this like, so it's in some sense, I think it's shifting our lens. Yeah, and this is going to be, I'm saying this as a possibility of an insight. It's about we get lost trying to go in and examine where is that line between heart work and outreach. And that's the wrong thing to do because there's never going to be a clear line. That's always going to be fuzzy. But there's going to be this is core heart work. This is core outreach. And then that makes everything else get a little clearer. It's sort of like the science principle too, of like we eliminate what what's around the edges, and that gets us clarity on the center bit. And anyhow, I don't know if that's useful, so I'm going to pass on to Roland.
Uh, yeah, yep. I like what you were just saying. What's the core? Um, since there will always be overlap. And I think it might be easier for me to, I'm just trying to formulate for myself what I think the core is. And oddly enough, it is easier for me to say what I think the core for outreach is than it is
Mm,
for hard work.
mm. Go for it.
Well, outreach is um, it is all of the communications stuff. It is formulating and um, disseminating information. It is managing contacts and connections with other people and organizations, organisms outside of the Lifeboat Academy organism. And to a certain extent also managing the places where organizations overlap, where there's a fuzziness between the lifeboat and other organizations. Yeah. I guess and this is it is both the core and it is also fuzzy for heart work, because in my mind heart work is about how we work together, and that is an overlap with every guild. So over to April.
Yeah, heart work is the process, but more than the process, it's actually the content that happens from the process and the practices that support the content being as wholesome, healthy, and useful as possible. The other thing that occurs to me is, I mean, thinking about boundaries between guilds now, is that there can be a line, but it needs to be a dotted line, or you know, a bit of a patchy line, which is not quite the same as a fuzzy line, but that there needs to be the permeability of that line back and forth. It's a membrane around some other stuff that needs to be protected and contained, I guess. So there's a chance of, stuff going one way or another around that line. But the line needs to be there to provide the vessel, I guess, in a way. And the other thing is, my head keeps going back to wanting to do diagrams. I'm a visual learner from diagrams. So Venn diagrams is one way, scattergram is another way of doing diagrams that has some in stuff and some out stuff. There might be other ways as well. But one of these days I'm going to get curious enough to actually start constructing some of that on my scratch pad here, where I regularly diagram stuff, and just as it's a doodle diagram that has truth to it. And so I'm going to undertake to do that for myself. Some of that I've been thinking about it and thinking about how much fun it would be to do that, but I haven't done it yet. And after I think about it, once I've done it and considered it a while, then I'll bring maybe something to this discussion that may be helpful in terms of what's in and what's out for a guild. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I feel like this is really useful. All of a sudden, I said last time that I didn't feel like I had clarity, and now in this conversation, I feel like I'm getting clarity, because I think that heart work, and April, I think you put your finger on something really important. It's the content from the process about it's so to put, the most simplistic formula is, I think heart work is about agreements. And agreements are, what do we know from experience we need to be able to collaborate effectively? So it is, how do we work together? And how we work together is our reminders of how it works best are the agreements. And the process is a way of keeping those agreements alive and fluid and nimble and effective. And so in one way, then outreach is working with people who haven't signed on to the agreements.
Yeah.
And heart work is working with people who have signed on. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's one of the dots or one of the dashes in the line. Because there's a process where people are coming through outreach to the agreements. And like the agreement circle that we're hosting tomorrow is an opportunity for people who haven't yet signed on to the agreements to understand the agreements so that they can sign on to them, and so that it is a permeable boundary. But there is something about, like, this is incredibly inappropriate language, but in some, actually, you know what? I'm shifting our original. We had the process, the guild number 2 was the immune system. And I think Heartwork is the immune system, actually. That Heartwork is about making sure that within the boundaries of the academy, people are adhering to the agreements.
Yeah.
And that the agreements are, kept alive and put into practice. And I think there may be something about like the Guild 2, the Curiosity Guild, is maybe more about developing new agreements. I'm thinking about the experimental part of it. It's sort of like when in doubt, when we're sure of the agreements, like, we keep coming back to the tried and true agreements. That's what the heart work is all about. But when they're sort of exploring a different way to do it, could there be a better way? Then that's research. Could there be a better way? Anyhow, I think I'm getting rambly, but I'm feeling like this is really useful. And I added flowchart to diagrams that are useful. Over to you, Roland.
Yeah, I think thanks for bringing in the Curiosity Guild, because there is the I there is a tipping point where something would go to the Curiosity Guild for research, but that because one of the tools that we use is the oral tradition, that within the guild or within any guild really, there is shifting that happens in how the process is interpreted and used, including in the Heartwork Guild. So that's a really interesting thing in and of itself. I mean, right now we all overlap into other guilds. So there's a kind of uniformity that is present because we're all we're all sort of interwoven. And at one point, the membership will grow, and the guilds may start to anyway, this might be future thinking too much, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. All I wanted to say is that at one point, it would be interesting to have a way of seeing how the guilds are applying the philosophy of the Lifeboat Academy. And then I don't know if that would be a Heartwork or if it would be a Curiosity Guild. If either of those guilds still exist, because part of the oral tradition, the way that we're adopting it is that guilds get reviewed, and can shift and change at the yearly charrettes. So whatever happens, anyway, understanding and learning from how different guilds are applying and interpreting the agreements and the circle process. And yeah, I will leave it at that. Over to April.
Okay, I don't think I have anything else to add. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I'm gonna reminders are good, so I'm gonna remind us of what we've talked about so far. So we are thinking that we want to gather, we're reviewing all of our conversations and activities from the last year to pass on our learnings to the coordination circle for our annual reflection process. So we want to go through lessons learned. What does seasonal thinking mean to us? How is that unique to our heart work? How has our thinking shifted over the year? And what are the next steps?
Yeah.
And then within that, we've talked about reminders, the different forms that reminders can take and how they're useful. We've talked about the seasonal review being in part about that I've had too much coffee today. Interpersonal feedback, which hopefully is not impersonal. Um, and also looking at what didn't work, but not getting stuck there, just kind of taking it as information. And then we talked about our thinking around our responsibilities and how we relate to how we think we relate to Heartwork, our Outreach and Curiosity Guild. And we have some refinements on, and I think some next steps actually coming out of what it means to be a caretaker and how to support people in that role so that things are getting done and it works well. And at the moment, that feels pretty complete. I'm not ready to say I'm totally willing to move on, but I think I'm about ready to move on. So over to Roland.
I can tell you keep forgetting.
I do. So
I thank you for going over that, and nothing has come up to add. So over to April.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to move on as well. I'm still thinking about seasonal thinking and making sure that I'm thinking in the way that would be seasonal. I want to have something in seasonal thinking about reflecting the nature and flow of the actual season, being able somehow to speak to what's different in autumn than in spring or in summer or winter. To me, there's very, very different things about the different seasons. And that's, for me, one of the areas of conceptual growth is in realizing that I've always thought seasonally, I just didn't know that's what it was called. And now I'm hearing from other people about all kinds of seasonal thinking and thinking, wow, that's even better. Like there's something about that that is epiphanous, if that's an adjective to describe that light bulb moment for myself. Over to Ben.
yeah, I agree. Um, and I think it's also, and this is maybe reflecting also on in terms of how shifting thinks. It's just that the tongue isn't fully supported by the neurons behind. Um, so, um, what I was thinking about was Wei Wu Wei and fractals and holons, because there is, there's an energy, there's a cadence that has a sort of a natural, like a seasonal. So Roland and I are really leaning into a weekly structure. So, our Monday looks different than our Friday, looks different than um, and there is definitely that energy in the week. There is also energy around the year, what happens what you want to do in the spring, how much time you have available in different areas is different in the spring, summer, and fall. So leaning into that, I think, is actually the 20 that gets you 80. It's sort of like, um, well, Roland has this little reel, like a 30-second thing that's the song, I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. And it's very fun. And it's also like, and I don't wanna. And it's just one of the things we joke about is leaning into the like making a song about I don't want to do the work today. It just lightens it, it's sort of like, not trying to deny it or push it away. It's just kind of working with it. So anyhow, um, okay. Yeah, so I think that's just a long-winded ditto. But actually, no, I think that the thing that I want to add on top of that is it's also looking for the 20 that gets you 80.
Yeah.
Looking for where it's easier.
Yeah.
I'm done. Over to you, Roland.
Sorry for the blast of noise. I was trying to, I thought I would go find the clip, and then I opened YouTube to find it, and it started talking at me before. Um, I'll forward it at some point. It is definitely a way of finding the humor in things when you really don't want to. Yeah, and whenever I hear the 20 that gets you 80, I think of way of looking for way open.
Mhm.
And in terms of seasonality, that makes a lot of sense. And this, I know that naturally I feel more than usually run down at at this time of the year as we move into winter. And I really look forward to the point where it's difficult to do any work because either it's horrible outside or people are too busy doing Christmas stuff that I am forced to do nothing because that's kind of what I can do is nothing. In terms of autumn moving into winter, it is uh, a downshifting time of the year. And that's, we talk a lot about biomimicry, and that is just what organisms do in this hemisphere at this time of the year. So over to April.
A forced nothing. Look for the forced nothings in your life at this time of year. It's also for me a time of layering up. So I tend to extend that into a metaphor. What am I trying to layer up in my life? So as well as putting on base layers, more, wool has come back into fashion in my house, and several layers on top of that, plus the big fuzzy socks, um, are just necessary to living at this time of year and living a life that's toasty. So I try to think, okay, how else can I be layering up intellectually, interpersonally, whatever, because it makes me feel better at this time of year. It's a forced resilience in a way too. Anyway, that's apropos of, I guess, forced nothing. Um, Over to Ben.
Well, my thoughts are now moving to kind of wrapping up in next steps.
Yeah.
And there's how this gets reported to the coordination circle. But then I think there's also, are there any recommendations that are coming from, I mean, there already are some recommendations in there about encouraging other guilds to ask some questions um, and it's also making me think, because I've got bylaws on the brain, the the process includes, so there are 2 meetings, 2.5 meetings that are kind of written in there. There's a reflection meeting where the stewardship council, things go to the coordination circle. Basically the kind of reports go to the coordination circle. The coordination circle presents the report on the year to the stewardship council that compares progress against plan, and they then start to project forward. And they set up the annual design charrette. And part of the design charrette is the first meeting of the stewardship council. So that's why it's sort of 2 meetings in one. But it is all the things that we have done in the past as part of our design charrette, which is revisit the North Star, given what we've done, where are we now? What are the lessons learned, and how do we apply that moving forward? And I think in terms of next steps, what I'm thinking about is how do each of the guilds shape what happens at the design charrette?
Yeah.
So that's how do we just make sure that somehow that annual meeting incorporates, and actually that might be just a kind of this great, the soupiness of it is that, basically each of the guilds is encouraged to apply the lessons learned from the year in the design of the design charrette.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that's the next step. And in a way, I think that means that we don't really have anything concrete. The only thing concrete I think we need to do from this that's occurring to me is a report to the coordination circle and a recommendation around how we work together to design the annual meeting / design charrette. Over to Roland.
Those sound like good action items. That's all. Over to April.
I agree. Over to Ben.
All right, well then I don't have anything else to contribute, so
Cool.
yeah. I guess back to the co-caretakers.
So, Ben, would you be so kind as whenever you feel like the notes are ready, let me know. I will upload the recording and send it out to the Heartwork Guild. And yeah, anything else? Anything else that we need to do? Either now or until next time. Over to April.
Did we, I can't remember what the original list was on the agenda. I guess my question is, how far did we move through the agenda?
To the end.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Aren't we
Yeah.
something?
Well, we have established the badges on there, but I'm assuming now that's the item on the agenda. It's like can't remember the culture, but they always ensure that there's a mistake in every artwork so as not to insult God. So that's the thing that we have on our agenda, so as to not insult God, that we have this item that we never actually talk about.
And it could
That's
be
my
one,
story, and I'm sticking with it.
one amongst many ideas. Well, it's not so bad. I mean, we could just call it a parking lot where we keep that kind of thing. And some days we feel like walking into the parking lot, starting up the vehicle and driving it into the horizon or wherever, because it's the kind of vehicle that we need right now, and because it's shiny and new, and I get to drive it. Somebody hands me the keys to something else. Yeah, good. I'm glad that we've gone through all of that. Is it time for us to have a closing round of what you're going to take away and what this has meant?
I have a question. What does reporting to the coordination circle look like? Oh,
I have a proposal. Since this is, I will double check, since I have been knee deep in bylaws, I'll double check what we say officially, where we need to do. But I think this can look like an Asana task, and just bullet points in an Asana task of, Heartwork Guild annual report, and basically take the above and do a little refinement and pass it on to the coordination circle. I don't think it needs to be any formal thing. And we're in uncharted territory. So whatever ideas people have for what would make this most useful, go for it. So I don't know where we are in the circle. I guess back to you, Roland.
yeah.
I just intervened.
So I think we did a lot of high level talking. Would it be useful as part of the report to also list the things that we've accomplished. You know, like the we've got the lessons learned and that kind of thing, but there's
Oh,
also
right.
voyons, I can't really brain fart. Um, initiating the connect
products.
the dots and the agreement circle idea and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anything else for that? Over to you, April.
No, but I'm dying somewhere in here to insert the cocktail hour idea again as
Next
maybe
steps.
a next step, yeah, or something to be. It's our. I want it to be our experiment for the next season, I guess. With badge.
The cocktail badge.
Yeah. And it's not for consumption. Maybe it's for best recipe or responsible use of illicit
Well,
items.
and you get badges for uh demonstration of proficiency.
Okay.
It's not competition. There's a badge for everyone who's competent.
Everyone's a winner.
Everyone gets a badge.
Okay.
I think, is that over to me?
Yes, over to you, Ben.
One of the things I can do is actually search Asana for all of the completed tasks that have Heartwork associated with it. So I can add that to see if there's anything we're missing. This is the beauty of the way we've been working, is that whatever tasks we've come up with and have completed, there's a record that is searchable. And actually April's thing reminded me that it is not something that we need to do in the report for the last year, but it is something to start thinking about. What's the focus? What's the growth edge for Heartwork for next year? What's our annual theme? What are some big milestones that we might want to take on? And that really comes out and gets refined in the design charrette, but it's worth thinking about at this point.
Yeah.
So that's me. I think I'm good. So back to you, Roland.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Over to April.
I have nothing to add except I thought of another bumper sticker for the seasonal feeling that is evoked in me around this particular season, which is lying fallow. When someone says, "What are you doing?" especially if I'm lying down recumbent reading a book and not appearing to pay attention to anything, I will reply, just like the fields in the farm, I am lying fallow as a necessary step in the process of life. Over to Ben.
You can't flow if you can't ebb. I'm good. Ron?
Good. So we're done.
All right. Do we want to check out round?
Yeah, why not?
Just takeaways?
I have managed to be checked in just enough to be able to participate, but generally I am already checked out. So over to April.
What can I say? I'm going out in a blaze of sunshine here, apparently. Yeah, thank you for all of this, but I am now going to step out into this light and do some physical tasks that involves my muscles and my brain as well. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think that's my checkout is I'm feeling overly hot in here and claustrophobic, and I think I need to get out, and I'm not committing to doing work just yet, but I'm gonna go outside and see what calls me. So yeah, that's my checkout. Back to you, Roland.
Cool. Back to you, April.
That's all I have to say. Yeah, that's it. The end. No, I won't do cutting the throat and the bye-bye part.
Yeah.
Thank you, you guys.
All right. See you soon. Remember, we've got agreement circle tomorrow morning, if you can make it.
I may or may not. I'll try. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.